Okay. Yes, let's do that so they can intelligently respond. All right. It is 6:31. I'm going to call to order the session of Cherry Hills Village City Council. Today is Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. Roll call, please.
Councillor Safavi?
Here.
Councillor Wheel? Councillor Sheldon?
Here.
Councillor Blum?
Here. Thank you very much. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Hold on a second. Let me get the see who signed in. If you're first, you can be up. Actually, we have number one is Laura Crispin signed up to speak. Laura, you.
Because I'm going to speak on the code, you can cross me out, and I signed up on the other.
Okay. Then, Mr. Jim Johnson. Mr. Johnson, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Jim Johnson, 4575 South Franklin Street. I've lived there for 20 years. A little bit about the code amendments when that issue comes up, but I had it.
Would you mind take off your mask? I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, you're 6 feet away from me, so I guess that's all good. Anyway, east corner there that someone bought. I think it's a 2.5 acre lot. And, you know, there was a lot of very mature trees. And the new owner came along and cut down all the trees on the site. And I think it just cuts away literally at the character and Cherry Hills in general. And I understand, you know, but a suggestion that I have for you is that property. So, for example, on that 2.5 acre site, there is a 50-foot setback. So, would it do any regulation within the city to prohibit down mature trees or any tree? It does not inhibit their ability to build whatever they want on the property. Zoning requirements, which are all good. So it's would start, but I sure think it would be helpful to the character. And honestly, all of the citizens, it's, you know, mature vegetation. So anyway, during my 2 minutes and 41 seconds.
Or Mr. Workman about that, because we do have an ordinance to you how that works, and that may be useful. Thank you for coming to it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my understanding is the tree ordinance has to do with plant. And I think you also have to have some sort of component to that. Then that's a different story, right?
Thank you. Appreciate your comment. Two, is that right? Okay. Now, or
Staff, all of whom I'm beginning to get to know about the code, and I'm not very deeply in to be consistent with what and bees. We have bees. We want to make sure we can keep them. It's one of our most popular. And I think there may be some confusion about the language and making sure we track. It's a plea to do that, and I'm supporting Laura's work.
thank you for coming tonight.
Hi, this is Janie Carpenter at 9 Random Road. I'm also in support of making sure we haven't inadvertently tend to change about bees and horses. I want to also tree canopy and our current policies of how do we preserve the tree canopy in our through this master plan process. I think we've heard loud and clear what people value. We think some of those policies become harder and harder to have healthy trees going forward as we look at climate change. So I just hope we're looking forward and thinking once they're gone. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comment. If you like, and go home later. Go home now. I know. Okay. So we'll pass on.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
To actually pull,
Would you like to pull the minutes up too?
yeah,
Okay.
please.
Councilor Sheldon, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'd just like to last meeting and therefore would not like to be voting.
I move to approve the item 6A.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those are approved. Unfinished business. You have the floor. This is Council Bill 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, Series 2022. For the Cherry Hills Village Municipal Code, and this is the second and final reading.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. As you just use amendments, the first reading for these was January 4th of this year. And just like at the to the end of the presentation to ask questions, easier and probably more productive if we have. At first reading, Council heard 19 proposed amendments. 16, 17, 18, and 20. The amendments to chapters 2, 7 on first reading with no changes from Council. Therefore, and tonight's presentation will focus on the amendments that Council identified. Proposed amendments in Chapter 16, Council asked for additional information on general animal packet, council directed the removal and future discussion primary structure. This proposed amendment has been removed from consideration. Council requested more information as well as some options related to publication. That information was provided as Exhibit H in your packet. And finally, the definition of a primary tonight's discussion. First is related to horses and animal husbandry. Before we get into the specifics of this, as was outlined in your packet this evening, the city does not have a limit on the number of animals you can own, as long as they're not prohibited under Chapter 7 of the city's municipal ordinance. For council's benefit, the language highlighted in yellow on this screen is new since first reading, but was included in your packet. The language highlighted in green is new since first reading and was not included in your staff report. It represents information that was discovered by staff as well as language that was collaborated on with a member of the community. And just for council's benefit, I will flip back and forth between some slides here just for some illustrative purposes. Before we get into the details, though, I do want to re-emphasize the purpose of housekeeping amendments. They really serve three purposes. One is to create additional clarity, one is to correct inadvertent omissions, and also to create consistency within the document. This proposed amendment is intended to correct an inadvertent omission that occurred with the code modernization in 2019. It is intended to restore the ability to have horses in the village as they have been historically allowed. Prior to the modernization in 2019, there was no land use table. Rather, each zone district was its own section of the code, and the allowed uses for each zone district were listed in that specific section. The R1 zone district allowed, and I quote, agriculture, agricultural including nurseries, raising of livestock and poultry, and orchards, provided that no such agricultural use be permitted if offensive or injurious because of odor, noise, or other nuisance. The normal odors, noises, and other side effects of animal keeping shall not be considered nuisance except for provided in Chapter 7 of Article 2 of this code. Commercial activities such as greenhouses, nurseries, fur farms, truck gardens, farms operated for the disposal of garbage, animal kennels, or stables shall not be permitted except that a maximum of 2 horses not owned by the resident of the involved property may be boarded and stabled on that property without such boarding and stabling being regarded as a commercial activity. End quote. Pre-modernization, Chapter 16 did not have a definition for livestock, and since horses are referenced for the purpose of boarding, it is logical to assume that horses were considered livestock. The allowed uses in the R2 and the R3 zone district were, quote, the following uses shall be permitted in the R2, or in the case of R3 zone district, any use permitted in the R1 2.5 acre residential district, end quote. In 2019, the code modernization created the land use table that is in effect today, and a portion of which is on the slide in front of you. It also created the term agricultural livestock. As part of the modernization as well, 2 definitions were added. A definition for livestock, and it reads, means cattle, llamas, alpacas, sheep, goats, pigs, rabbits, chickens, turkeys, pheasants, ducks, and other animals when raised for the purpose of commercial food or fiber production. The term livestock does not include bees, donkeys, horses, or mules, nor does it include animals that produce food or fiber exclusively for domestic consumption by the animal's owner. The second definition that was created was for agricultural livestock, and that is the line item in the land use table that describes allowed uses within the different zone districts. This definition means animal husbandry, agriculture involving fish or invertebrates, raising livestock, or milking dairy cows or goats for commercial purposes with no on-site slaughter, processing of meat products, or retail sales of agricultural products. The phrase agricultural livestock does not include the phrase intensive agriculture or community garden. Since the term for agricultural livestock is defined, and specifically is silent on horses and bees and donkeys and mules. And the term livestock, which was in the broader term of agricultural livestock, specifically excludes horses, bees, donkeys, or mules. It's staff's interpretation that horses were inadvertently made so that they are not allowed. So as not to inadvertently change the impact of the term livestock as it may be used in other sections of Chapter 16, staff has proposed a definition for the term animal husbandry since it is currently undefined. The proposed definition for animal husbandry has been intentionally written broadly so that horses could be allowed under this definition. And it reads, animal husbandry means the rearing of animals for the sole purpose of the enjoyment of the property owner with no intent to use the animal or parts of the animal for any commercial or charitable purpose. Council will hear from the public this evening that this definition is too restrictive. Staff would offer that the language clearly states for the sole purpose of the enjoyment of the property owner and not for the sole use of the property owner. Additionally, the phrase charitable purposes was included as some charitable events can have the same externalities, such as parking or odor or noise, as commercial operations. This is intended to give the city the ability to enforce on either commercial or charitable events on even footing. For those animals that are used as a one-time or sporadic purpose, such as a prize riding lesson from a silent auction, would not rise to the level of a charitable purpose. Going back to the land use table, some things that are different from first reading. It was staff's understanding that horses were historically allowed in the R3A zone district, which is essentially the Buell neighborhood and the Covington neighborhood, for lots that are 1 acre or more in size. That was based on a misunderstanding in terms of how you read the uses for an R3A zone district in the prior code, which stated the following uses shall be permitted in the R3A district, any use permitted in the R1 2.5 acre residential district except churches, schools, and agriculture, which was previously stated in the presentation. The table has been updated for accuracy. Additionally, there was some discussion amongst council at first reading whether or not 1 acre was an appropriate size. At the time of first reading, staff was under the standing that had been the historical threshold for having horses or other livestock in the R3 zone district, but staff believes this may have been a codified standard at one time, but was a policy in 2019. For the benefit of council, as with any of this language, council has the prerogative to change the proposed language of 1 acre or more being the threshold. If council desires to keep the threshold at 1 acre or more, staff has added language to clarify that the lot size would include the adjacent right-of-way as allowed by section 16.940 of our code. And again, in summary of this particular amendment, the intent of this amendment is to resolve the previously omitted ability to have horses. And that really is the intent and the goal of this ordinance. And before we move on to the next one, I will pause and see if there is council discussion at this point.
Any questions for staff?
I do have one. Paul, thanks. Good presentation. Do you have any indication as to how many lots are in Buell or Covington that would fall under this criteria that could, within their lot lines, not 1 acre, but would be if you dedicated right away?
Sure. But there are a handful of lots, maybe say 10, 12.
And are there owners in those communities that are potentially looking to? Okay.
Paul, to be definition of R3, I mean, it's 1 acre, right?
Correct, that's correct.
Right, so if something's coded or it is zoned R, here's where I'm going. The concern is that you've got properties that 16-9. And what if there are properties, well, I guess historically, if they are R3.
I wouldn't say that's a safe assumption. I would say to meet that requirement. Are there a handful of lots that are substandard? Most, just due to the nature of how old some of those lots are.
And that would be my concern, is that you've got a handful of properties that might historically be horse properties if they're not going to meet that standard. And so for council's discussion, do we want to, we could solve it simply by saying if it's R3 and stay away from the 1 acre mark. So we pick up this.
Absolutely, council could do that, absolutely.
And that's my point, is that, if they're already R3, let's give it to them.
And I would offer that regardless, if there were no size limitation, that would not under Chapter 7 of the code. They would still have to meet those requirements.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if you choose to put 10 horses in that space, then yes, you can do that. 10 horses that you own. You have other issues that are quickly coming to it.
Councilor Brown.
So to make sure I understand that correctly, 1 acre lot.
That's correct.
So really, the qualifier is unnecessary. If we had the lot non-conforming R3 lots out there, but they've been there for years.
Decades, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
And R3A, and that does anyone know if those HOAs even allow?
No, they're prohibited by the HOAs.
Yeah, so no one should be okay. And then exactly what happened to the owner? Where did that go and why?
Done part of the code modernization, but that that requirement, section 16 to 730, related to horse boarding and training.
Okay, I just meant in the we had a statement, we had a sentence at the end there that said, imagine stabled. See also blah. And so I guess we just felt like maybe it wasn't even necessary to
Say it twice, correct.
Got it. Okay. Those are my questions about that.
Questions? Councilor Wheel or Councilor Savabi? What? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Can you give me what went away with code modernization and what are we bringing back? Is it expanding anything? Is it contracting anything versus the pre-code modernization world? This amendment.
No, the intention of this amendment is to return the ability to have horses as it was pre-modernization in 2019.
No questions. Well done.
Sorry, can I ask one more question about that?
Sure.
Kind of to Randy's point then. What change was that made people not able to have horses?
So there was no definition for livestock.
Okay.
However, the allowed uses referenced the rearing of livestock, and it's an inference out for boarding
Exclude-
purposes
right, okay.
that they were considered under the umbrella of livestock. With the adoption, there were the two definitions on the screen that were added to the code modernization. The those animals,
Okay.
and there's no mention of it in the livestock.
Right, so these tables were in there where it says agriculture, live.
There was
Problem
there was
was
no
that
table. It was just a,
livestock specifically said that doesn't mean horses, so.
in the current version of our code.
Yeah,
that
that's
is
the
correct.
problem that we're trying to
That is the
fix.
problem.
One more question. Paul, regarding bees, there are no issues, right?
Again, because the definition that it just talks about animals in general, any animal would qualify under that definition for animal husbandry, including bees, mules.
So for intents and purposes, we're back to where we started with.
That is the intention of this amendment.
Okay.
That it is likely that staff will bring a polish of this, if you will, before council at some point in the future. It is part of the character and the fabric of our community to make sure that this is really polished and gets us there. We as staff believe this does that, but
Are you going to move to Council Bill 2 then? Okay.
So where are bees? Where are they allowed? Where were they allowed in the previous code?
it would be my opinion that they would still be allowed in the R1, R2, R3, whatever the code would have referenced at that time.
Okay.
I'll give you a minute.
I just remember that discussion pretty vividly, and I want to make sure that we're
Sure.
not now leaving them out of some place that you can have bees but not horses.
Well, and I remember that discussion because so much of it came down to, what trumps of controls, and HOAs, could say, we're not going to have bees in our neighborhood. And that, even though they were allowed in the code, the HOA.
The next amendment before you this evening is proposed amendment number 4. This was related to publication and notification requirements. This evening, staff has not proposed any changes from first reading, as it's still staff's recommendation to council. However, there are options provided for council this evening, and we will run through those. As a refresher for council, the column on the left shows the current notification requirements for land use applications. As you can see, there are two types of notification for publication and two types of notification for mailing. Which one of the two options is required is currently identified in Table 16-7-255D and based on application type. Having two separate types of notification can lead to confusion for applicants, staff, and the community. This is particularly true when it comes to multiple or sister applications. If somebody has 2 or 3 applications that require both notifications, it can get really confusing. Why did my neighbor get one? Why didn't I? Why did they get one for zoning and I only got one for subdivision? And so it just creates some confusion. The column on the right shows what the proposed notification requirements for land use applications would be regardless of application type. should council decide to move forward as proposed. As part of the homework between first and second reading, council asked staff to provide some information related to visits to the city's website. In 2021, the website received just under 90,000 visits. 34% of that was on a mobile device. The top visited page was the city's agenda center, followed by the form center, followed by the document center, and then building permits, and then the police department, and then sales tax. Council also asked for staff to reach out to the villager regarding their subscription information. We did reach out to them and ask for that information. They responded that their subscription numbers are confidential, but their website receives approximately 23,000 visits a month, and the legal notifications are posted on that website. Additionally, staff researched 10 other Denver area metro communities and how they approach publication and notification. The average days of publication before hearing were 11.8 days. 5 municipalities allow posting on the website. 4 municipalities allow posting in a newspaper of general circulation, and 1 community allows either format. The average days of posting before hearing is 12.6 days. The average days of mailing before the hearing is 13.1 days. And the average distance of mailing was 812 and a half feet. Communities that only notice adjacent property owners were 2. Based on this information, staff has created this list of potential alternatives. They certainly are not the only alternatives that are available. They're just ones that seem the most obvious. And they are listed in in order of staff's recommendation to council. The first is change the requirements consistent with the proposed language from first reading. Potential pros for this approach is it creates consistency for publication and notification across application types. It reduces the publication lead time and is no cost. No paper subscription is required to obtain published notice. It's consistent with the industry standard to publish notification on the city's website. Potential cons with this approach is it requires residents to proactively visit the city's website to obtain published notice. Second option would be to change the requirement consistent with the proposed language from first reading, but increase the distance of the required mailing. Again, right now it's 1,000 feet or adjacent depending on what mailing type is required. Potential pros of this is that it creates consistency for publication and notification across application types. It reduces the publication lead time and is no cost. There's no paper subscription required to obtain published notice. It's consistent with industry trend to publish notification on the city's website, and it actively notices more property owners. I want to emphasize actively notices. Publishing is a passive way of noticing, where mailing is more of a proactive way of noticing. Potential cons in this is that there are increased costs to the applicant. Property owners may get confused as to why they are receiving notice for an application that is, in their opinion, not near them. And it may be required to notify property owners outside of the city on a more regular basis. The third option would be to only change the requirements so that there's one set of public notification requirements with no changes to the format of the publication, i.e. keeping it published in a newspaper of general circulation here in the village. Potential pros with this is that it creates consistency for publication and notification across application types. Potential cons are publication has a long lead time and is a cost to the applicant. It requires a paper subscription to receive the published notice. Then the fourth option, as always, council has the option to do nothing. The pro with this approach is that publication and notification are consistent with historic practices. And that's the presentation for this particular amendment. I will pause for another moment and see if there are council questions or discussion.
Any questions for staff?
It could be a combination of 2 and 3 theoretically. I mean, these are
And it's just, we'll move on to the next topic. And so if there's something that you don't want to
I think 90,000 visits in a year, more is more, as I said at the last meeting, and asking people to publish in the newspaper is not burdensome, it's not expensive. If it reaches a few more people, then that's better, in my opinion. Yes. And in the newspaper. And we should have someone walking around town yelling it out loud. And on the side of bicycles and buses.
At first reading was what that distance should be. I mean, I think 1,500 feet's probably, if we wanted to increase the radius as well.
Okay, Mr.
So currently, the code gives the option for publication on the website. Would you be interested in? It doesn't satisfy the publication requirement, but it is what the code calls a courtesy notification.
Right. We do currently put them on our website, so I think it should be both. Yeah. And
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, Mr. Workman?
Just a quick question.
Oh.
So the 90,000 visits,
That would be to the website.
your website.
Right.
So, you know, that 90,000, then, for me at least, when I heard 90,000, our website, probably I've done it 20 times, but I've not gone to the public notice personally.
Right.
So for me, that 90,000, at least for this,
Absolutely. No,
well, and that's for a whole year, 90,000 for a whole year.
that's that's part of why staff wanted to just provide the. I was going to say informational purposes, but that sounds redundant. Amendment is the definition to accessory structure, and really this was just a removal of the language because the proposed amendment related to accessory structures on primary structures was removed from consideration, so that reference is not there. And then the last one before council this evening that we talked. Council may recall that the code does not currently have a definition for principal structure. And so in order to have one, there was some draft language proposed at the last meeting. And there was some discussion on council about how potentially to revise that definition and make it a little shorter.
A little bit when we say the one structure that is used for public or private purposes. One structure that's used for public, I mean, a pool house is also a structure that's used for a private purpose, but it's not the principal structure. That's not the right word. It's like
qualifier or an addition, something. Means the one structure that is mostly or mainly used.
And I think we all know what it means. We just can't put it into words, but private purpose. So is a pool house, but a pool house is not a principal structure. Why?
Define that.
That was over there.
Is there a definition of accessory?
Located on the same lot as a principal structure.
Subordinate structure.
Just a thought, Counselor Brown, what you're trying to structure that facilitates the primary use of where you're trying to go.
Yeah.
Again, a little on the fly. So.
I think that doesn't. Is that acceptable? I think that doesn't. I think that ties it to the primary use. Is an accessory to their primary use. All right. I think we can probably make that. Sounds like you can have consensus on that.
Mr. Mayor, that would be the conclusion. The only thing for the benefit of council, the recommended motion for each of the council bills is located in your packet on page 18.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to, if there are no more questions for staff, then I'm going to take, I know some people here wanted to speak. If you wish. You're good, very good. New job. Ms. Chrisman.
Laura Chrisman, I'm just going to take this off. I am speaking to the amendments, particularly the amendment with regard to the use of horses. I do appreciate, thank you, Paul, before this new modern, excuse me, it does that. But here's where I think that it is a substantial and material at all. And that is the language that says animal husband for the sole, and I want to emphasize sole purpose. That's that proposed amendment of the enjoyment of the property owner or parts of the animal. And I'll go to livestock in a minute. For any, with any, would also modify charitable. We have never restricted our stock or our bees for charitable purposes, ever. Very substantial change. How does that affect some of our owners, horse owners? We have horse owners who have horses that are, we have minis, and we have, there actually a couple of our minis are pretty famous. They go all dealing with charities, children, nursing homes, schools. My pony, it isn't a once-in-a-while event for him. He really can't be used for with handicapped children. He's soft, he's fuzzy. That wants to stop that. I do know and understand that this arose from some concern about therapy children coming because it caused parking problems. I do think we can deal with parking problems, but I don't think we are a community those children into Cherry Hills. And this is not just horses. This is all livestock. This is our chickens. our goats. This is kind of who we are. And charity and reaching out is housekeeping. I think this is extremely important. Let me talk about the commercial. I think you just need to flesh this out. I don't really think people are using horses for commercial purposes. To get egg designation on that. But I do think that there are some people using out of the wax and the honey. They may give it away, charitable, or they may go to people doing that. So that is a commercial use, technically. The tent is commercial. But it's a change from what we've historically. The issues that if we want to discuss them further, they should have a great deal of open discussion about this language. It does not return us to where we were. It further restricts us. It doesn't speak well of us as a community. And I know we're not like that. So, and I think that's an inadvertent, could be an inadvertent. I agree with all of you who believe the more notice. We do have a community that sometimes doesn't pay attention. And then they feel betrayed. At least if it's on the website, you said you have really done a lot to help people in this community. We don't need to be like other communities. We can reach out more. Thank you very much.
This.
Yes, please. Very briefly, I support and agree with what Ms. Chrisman said. That we don't overlook is this soul enjoyment terminology. People use horses with buggies behind them, and somebody owns the horse. The blocks in the street that don't own the horse. So that would be, other than soul enjoyment, I just would hate to prohibit anything like that.
Mr. Foster, did you want to add anything?
Members of Council, David Foster, 360 South Garfield. The proposed code amendments. Easy for me as a land use attorney to show up after advising and drafting these amendments to kind of identify some and probably not being too fair with these comments. But let me speak to a couple of the definition of husbandry. I just don't think it is open to far more interpretation. I would just encourage you to tweak the language of husband. So that language could go a long way. But it gave me an opportunity as I was. We've got some significant conflicts within your existing code that this might be an opportunity to clean up. For example, under this First Amendment, it reads, clarify that horses and equestrian facilities are allowed in our. I'm kind of curious. I read the code that allows equestrian R2 and O1 is conditional. If equestrian facilities are allowed in R1 and R2, maybe you want to clear that up to clarify some of these issues. Another issue that I've identified is limited horse boarding, equestrian training. That's not defined. Equestrian facilities is section 16.2730. Equestrian training, we speak to equestrian training is allowed as an accessory use to a single accessory use to a structure, not even to a use. And it goes on to describe the equestrian training does not as something that is closer to commercial use, which again, when you go back to husbandry, even though under this section of your code, limited horse boarding and equestrian training is allowed. And then I would suggest that there are probably a number 6.2 under Council Bill 2 that we modify those and bring them back. And I don't think there's that much cleanup that's necessary. That
Ms. Carpenter?
Random Road, and let me start off by saying I am not an attorney, so I'm asking a more general correctly. The language commercial or charitable purposes. My question relates to how and for example, if the Cherry Hills Land Preserve, which is a 501 education program around bees, which we do, equestrian, do that would be a charitable purpose if it's doing it for the community by a nonprofit, I presume. Is on what uses we've anticipated or might want to keep open for. And then the other question I had, which I don't know the answer to, is I'm not sure what the zoning is for the, that is a nonprofit, not a 501c3 is my understanding, but I don't know how that fits in and making sure that.
Thank you. Ms. Carpenter. I do think that there's going to be some cleanup. Clearly, we can move tonight and that need to be fixed. So I understand that, and I just want to get Mr. Workman, if you want to comment about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The ability to have horses in the village. That's the primary intent. And Ms. Crispin and I have had very good conversations here in the last couple. And we fully intend to bring at some point in 2022.
When we talk about bringing back a polished version to council, you're saying that under the assumption that we may pass?
Why would we want to clean it up?
I'm sorry, sir.
And vote on it.
I'm sorry, I still didn't hear you.
Version and then vote on it. rather than vote on it tonight and clean it up subsequently, because that sort of puts an indefinite period of time between,
The challenge with the code would not allow for horses, and God forbid if there were some disaster, that amendment were passed.
And so,
sorry, Dan.
I mean, let's quantify this so that I think that bring their horses back, and if that did happen, I'm wondering if there's some kind of emergency declaration. It seems silly to go ahead and approve this at second reading tonight, this portion at least, if we're going to just 60 days. That seems like a kind of like an exercise that we should not go through.
The city attorney has a comment.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone here thinks that this is the last and final word, or that all problems will be come up with tonight. I think Mr. Foster's pointed out a couple things that we're well aware of, that there needs to be on the code on this. Sorry, I couldn't resist on the wording of our code. So I do think there's a thorough intent of tonight's ordinance. So it's up to the pleasure of council. Just want to let you know.
And then just turn around and rewrite it. That to me makes no sense.
Well, and then you can issue to a date certain, I mean, down the road.
No, your other comment was also about the same topic.
This is really, the suggestion is to take off, it would be Council Bill 2 to take off. Or is it just a portion of Council Bill 2? Which amendment are we talking about?
It's Amendment 1 and Amendment 6.2. Proposed tabling.
Not tabling, we'd continue for a date certain.
Not tabling it, would you?
No, that's fine. So that, with that understanding, we can then. So we could proceed tonight to Council Bill 3, Council Bill 4, Council Bill 5, and all.
The only thing is related to Amendment 4 of Council that you want that are different from what's proposed in terms of the notification of publication. Please note that in your motion.
Will do.
Yeah, our large lot makeup here in the city, I think it makes sense to have a little bit broader as instead of less, so if we could pick up a few more residents surrounding would be good.
Okay. Pretty easy.
One at a time, okay.
I move to approve on second and final reading, Council Bill 1, amending Article 6 of Chapter 2 of the Cherry Hills Village Municipal Code concerning the powers and
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll.
Councillor Brown?
yes?
Councillor Gallagher?
Yes.
Councillor Sheldon?
Yes.
Councillor Plum?
Yes.
Okay. Let me look at Council. How can I refer to these? Are they referred to in here as sections? Okay, well, let me try this. Approve on second and final reading. Three, 5, 6.3, and 6.4 of Council Bill 2, Series 2022, 3, 7, and 9 of Chapter 16 of the Cherry Hills.
Second.
I think that does it. Is that right?
I'm going to come back to
There was-
order, and then I'm going to continue the.
Heard you correctly, 6.3 was included in that?
Yep.
And there was some discussion of revising that.
Oh, yes, okay, so,
Structure that
sorry, you're right,
facilitates.
take out 6.3. Amendments 2, 3, 5,
That sounds right. Motion and second on that. Any further discussion? I think that hearing none, I'll take a roll call, Laura.
Brown?
yes?
Counselor Gallagher?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Counselor Blum?
Yes.
To approve on second and final reading. Series 2022, a bill for an ordinance amending Article, was that? Article 7 of Chapter 16, regulations with the following amendments. That the of mail notice be increased from 1,000 feet to 1,500 feet of the boundaries of the subject property. Section E, under publication, that the requirement that published notice shall be Hills Village be maintained.
Say the last part again? What about maintained?
Leaving the words printed in a newspaper of general circulation in the city of Cherry Hills Village and provided on the city of Cherry Hills Village
And I know that
website.
it's not requirement to do this, but are we going to also add in there the requirement that it be website, or is that a?
And
already being
and it's
done?
already in there and provided. Suggesting that we take that stricken language and put it back in. Yeah. Should read, published notice shall be printed in a newspaper of general City of Cherry Hills Village website.
Yep, I'd second that.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call.
Bill?
Yes.
Counselor Brown?
Yes?
Counselor Gallagher?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Approve on second and final reading. Amendment 6.3 of Council Bill 2. 9 of Chapter 16 of the Cherry Hills Village Municipal Code concerning that the definition of principal structure be changed to read, principal structure meets the primary use of the property, and then continues with the second.
Second.
I think that does it too. Okay, I'll take a roll call, Laura.
Counselor Safavi?
Yes.
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Counselor Blum?
Yes.
Okay, now for the two remaining, what,
Just,
Ask staff,
that's what I'm,
Mr. Workman is available on April 19th. And make sure you're not out of town.
No plans to be out of town.
That way. So we do have some other items on the April in discussion. So I would request that we consider April 19th because the agenda there is much.
to continue consideration of Council Bill 2, Series 2022, until April 19th, 2022.
hearing none, I don't think we need, I think it's all in favor of that.
Aye.
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 Now we're moving on to Council Bill 3, right?
Yeah. 3, 4, and 5.
I move to approve on second and final reading 3 of Chapter 17 of the Cherry Hills Village Municipal Code concerning the city's
Motion a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call.
Counselor Safavi? Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Counselor Gallagher?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
I move to approve on second and final reading Council Bill 4, Series 2022, a bill for an ordinance amending Article 11 of Chapter 18, pre-application neighborhood meetings.
Second?
Motion and second by Mr. Hearing none, a roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Safavi?
Yes.
Counselor Wheel?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Counselor Blum?
Yes.
Final reading Council Bill 5, Series 2022, a bill for an ordinance amending Article 3 of Chapter 20 of escrow for consultant review fees.
Second.
Hearing none, Laura, roll call, please.
Counselor Safavi?
Yes.
Counselor Wheel?
Yes.
Counselor Brown? Counselor Blum?
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody, for your work and attention. And Mr.
Thank you all for all the input and the discussion.
For bringing some of this to our attention. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bill 6, Series 2020, approving a supplemental appropriation. This is a first reading. We'll need two readings.
Members of City Council, per Council's direction, staff has reviewed to current employees. Staff has determined the one-time bonus can be paid from the city's American States Treasury Department released in January allows recipients to elect a rather than calculating the lost revenue utilizing the formula that was provided in the final rule eases the burden for recipients like Cherry Hills Village. It also allows for a broader set of uses, including the premium pay category for employees, allowance category, or the premium. After reviewing surrounding jurisdiction bonus programs and evaluating the cost of living in 2021 and 2022, City Manager Kramer has determined to receive a one-time discretionary bonus in the amount of $4,000. Employee or still employed by the city 21. There was a question earlier today regarding the wording of the Council Bill modified the language in the council bill and has placed a revised version with the changes. If approved, the supplemental appropriation will be in the amount of $201,950, which includes a one-time discretionary bonus of $4,000, paid taxes and benefits. Staff is available to answer any questions council may have at this time.
Mr. Mayor, if I could add a couple of comments.
You bet.
Thank you. That was well. I think we should take a moment to recognize pending council's vote. Very rare. Real feel-good opportunity for everyone involved. There was a breakthrough, thanks Jessica for finding it, regarding using the funding for the ARPA. A big part of this bonus from sticking with us. This has been a very tough year for the last, or 2 years. Yeah, through COVID. And even if you never had, or your teammates' family covering for COVID. And so we've had a lot of great folks stick with us for all employees that we really haven't seen in this village before. And the good news also with the ARPA funding, help our employees understand a bonus that we typically do, and we won't likely be able to keep doing ad infinitum. The funding source helps. So I think our employees are going to sincerely appreciate this. We're excited to be able to help provide this as a real gesture of thanks. Had with all of you. I think you're going to be excited to show that appreciation as well. So we get in local government to have a win-win-win. So I'm very grateful the way this has turned out. Thanks to Jessica for our path forward.
Thank you. And I do think this is what the ARPA funds really were intended to do. So it's I'm just pleased that we can find a way to say thank you to our staff. So.
Can I ask a quick question?
You bet.
Did I hear you that any staff that November, the last day in November, full bonus as well?
Correct.
No.
No,
They
if
have to be employed now, though.
They have to be employed now. So if they were employed November 1st and they're still employed, then yes, they will get the bonus. If they were employed.
So what we're saying here is that if somebody has been with us for 3 months, right now, they're still for the past 2 years of COVID, past year of COVID, they get the same $4,000.
That is correct. Had a lot of conversations about. When we look at the actuals of the number of employees that we're talking about here, it's not a huge number at challenges that it would create to start to make value judgments on, okay, this person's only worth 50% of what these other people are worth based on an arbitrary decision that we would have to make about what the cutoff time is, would create so many challenges and so many frustrations that I just referred to. So my recommendation, this is not staff, this is my recommendation, is that it's a set amount for all employees. Again, the number of folks that under your scenario that would be impacted here the full 2 years is really small.
Okay. No, sounds good. I mean, I rely on. That's all.
Any other? Well, I guess I'll entertain a motion first, and then we can have the discussion following the motion.
Do you have comment? Okay. I move to approve Council Bill 6, Series 2022, a bill for an ordinance of the City of Cherry
budget and approving the supplemental appropriation in the American Rescue Plan Act Fund for one-time.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
A motion, a second. Any further discussion now? Councillor Sheldon, or
Yeah,
Councillor Blum, you had something first?
Yeah, I just want to thank the staff on this. This is an issue that I initially raised, I think, back in November. It did not come out of our excess funds at the end of the year. I think it's a great job done by both you guys on this. So I want to thank them.
Likewise, I'd like to I think you're the one who brought it to, at least to my attention, that maybe there was a way for us to show our appreciation to our staff for sticking around with us, and not just the police. So thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Any other comments from council?
Yeah,
Councillor Will?
I certainly share, thank you, Mayor. I certainly share the. I just, for my own clarity, I had the concern that the way it was originally written would, in effect, open opportunities for. In Katie's motion, have we incorporated the revised language, or do we need to make an amendment to do that?
I don't believe so. You had a. That is simply a change to a whereas, which is a recital and not a non-binding, but it does illustrate the intent, which is as determined by the city manager. And the full intent of this ordinance is just to make the supplemental appropriation.
Thanks.
Councillor Swabi, Jim?
I just want to take this moment as well. Chris, you're doing a great job promoting the city has been and what you're continuing to promote. So, again, thank you to all the staff for doing a great job. So it's a well-deserved bonus. And
Roll call on this as well, so I'll take a roll call. Oh, sure. Councillor Sheldon?
I think this isn't scheduled for public comment, but there's been a request for public.
If you have public comment, please approach the lectern.
Thank you. 701 East Stanford Drive. Applications. Jessica, too much for finding this. For the city. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Two things that I have that are a concern to me. That one of our officers who was shot in the line of duty has turned in that person's resignation, correct? With my questions and concerns.
I would offer to you that we will have the opportunity to evaluate that by the amendment that is on their desk that allows for city manager discretion.
Thank you. Thing that wasn't clear as a resident from this point of viewpoint. The last time I spoke publicly, percent increase, right? So you had a 2.5% for could get the extra 1.5%. Something that bothered me that I didn't realize at the time was that some of our employees eligible for that extra 1.5% for merit increases because given how their pay is structured. How, as if there is something in that ARPA to make up that merit increase, that they would get the same total compensation that everyone on fair, because we have talked about being equitable, and I think this goes a long way. But again, I'm going to push the council for something to make it more equitable that we are missing for the, could not get that 1.5% because of how their structure is. So I was to make it equitable across the board.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Sorry.
I don't know if that's something we can answer or not. This eligibility is not something that is something that is much more deserving of further thought and discussion, and you're welcome to do that with the city manager and me or anybody on council, but to be addressed.
But thank you very
But
much.
there is discretion at the city manager level now to administer this, what we're about to adopt tonight, correct? Not the merit-based one and a half.
No, that's not within the city council, city manager's discretion right now. That's a legal.
Much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and any further discussion? This is the first reading, so roll call, Laura.
Yes. Counselor Gallagher?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Counselor Blum?
Yes.
All right, that passes. Thank you, everybody. We will then recess now. I have a Cherry Hills Village City Council and go into a meeting of the Cherry Hills Village Southmoor Circle and Hudson Parkway General Improvement District Board. I'll call it to order now at 7:52. Roll call, please, Laura.
Board Member Brown?
Here?
Chair Stewart?
Present.
Board Member Gallagher?
Here.
Board Member Sheldon?
Here.
Board Member Blum?
Here.
All right, first, remove anything from the consent agenda. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion. I think this is all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There we go. We now have regular notice and official seal. Now, I have a 7:53. I will adjourn the meeting of the Cherry Hills Village Southmoor Circle and Hudson Parkway General Improvement District Board and reconvene into the meeting of the. Let's have a brief update, a few comments, mayor's reports. We did have a CML board. The amicus, the legal group, what do you call yourself? The legal board joining in, taking a position on the Kuhlman case, which is the term limits case and how that applies and how it's calculated. Committee, so CML will be filing that. There was discussion about whether they could get it. My initial thought is that's unlikely, but they might. They're thinking about going straight to the Supreme Court of Appeals. If not, it's going to be kind of an open issue for what happens in November and affects. I think everybody wants it. The petitioners want it. Plaintiffs want it because they want the mayor out. And on the other side, so they know what to advise, and the municipal lawyers want to know how to advise their. It's all up in the air, and I'll keep you advised. We did have a meeting with, also the board has signed on to initiated legislation from CML statute, and we're under discussions now with language about how that will be done. The General Counsel of CML has proposed language with CML lobbyist and the General Counsel and Excel and the mayor. And Inglewood were on the call as well to explain our concerns to Excel. So we're still discussing how that.
This is specific to bidding public burying of power line projects, is what you're talking about?
There's a provision now in the statutes that prohibit competitive bidding. I think everybody's on board, even Excel, saying that's going to come out. The rest of it is being and we will probably raise it with Metro Mayor's Caucus as well. So, and there'll be a lot of people interested in this issue. On Metro Mayor's Caucus, too, just to report, we'll have a meeting tomorrow, our annual retreat, which will be by Zoom. But just an update on that, I've been nominated to the executive committee of the Metro Mayor's Caucus in the Metro Mayor's Caucus. So that term is for a couple of years.
And that's nothing but good for the village.
on Excel and other matters as well. So, all right, that's my report. Councillor Blum?
I just have a question. No report, but I've got a question. Bearing cable or whatever they were bearing, all the streets or all the sidewalks are marked up with red. Randy, are they responsible for cleaning that up, or is that something that we let go till it takes care of itself?
They are responsible for removing that. When we made the changes to the construction and excavation, be removed. Until the work is fully done, they don't have to remove those. And some of those marks are put on by the replacement of certain sections of that sidewalk. So that project won't be done probably until April or May, but we will follow.
Just one thing. I know we're tracking an ongoing code update. Continue updating our code every other meeting or so. It seems like we're. I look back now at what we did with telling us about all the inconsistencies in that one section about equestrian. I wonder if we had somebody audit what Todd did originally, how many other. This is the second or third person now when Mr. Johnson came in tonight and talked to us about that property owner at Quincy. Remind me, Paul, if you can, do we have this particular item on our long laundry list of agenda items to look at as far as up?
Year.
Okay. Yeah. For this year, I mean, I assume we're going to get to it before fourth quarter?
That's correct. It's anticipated to come before council at some point this summer.
Okay. Thank you. That was all.
No report.
Councillor Wheel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick update. Cherry Hills Farm HOA meeting. I don't think we're going to see anything in the near future about comfort station or any of the other topics that have come up or sort of circling. That's been pretty well tabled. They did approve the median to take that existing turn pocket and make it remove the curbing that's there, and so that there's a safe harbor for people exiting on Bellevue. That's all I have. Thanks.
Councillor Spivey?
A couple of more community-related news than city news. I'm not sure if Colorado was number one for women-led startups. That's pretty impressive. Second year in the nation for the number of the startups that were started by women in Colorado. So I hope everybody's proud of that. Second thing, I spent some time on Zoom with the mayor of Aurora, their two councilmen, the two CEOs of our local hospitals, the representative from the CU and DU Office of Presidents. It's all around the Fitzsimmons Innovation Center, the startups, everything that is happening around that area. It is really, really encouraging. And this area, it's pretty amazing. That I hope Colorado keeps promoting. I also spent some time with and there are some amazing companies that are popping out there. So in general, this is just really encouraging for what is happening around here with tech and bio.
City Manager.
If you have any department directors have any, I've seen you guys plenty. You're tired of hearing from me today. First of all, I just want to say thanks for what an amazing job you all did today during the retreat. I thought it was a great conversation. Everybody get on the same page and start rowing the boat in the same direction. Still a lot of tough conversations we need to have, for sure. But we won't get to those without a day like today. So thank you to council for that. One more time, I just want to say thank you for. I really do think that that is going to be a ray of light in what has been, for a lot of folks, a dark 2 years. So council might remember that the MOU that we signed with the Land Preserve for Quincy Farm required monthly meetings to work towards these annual plans that would be submitted. We have our kickoff monthly meeting tomorrow. So we're excited to have that and get the ball rolling there. As of now, we are still scheduled to be open tomorrow. I can tell you, while we've been sitting here, every school district in the metro area has closed for tomorrow. We may have some employees working from home because their kids can't go anywhere, but we are still scheduled to be open. If it does change, we'll.
Yeah.
What's that?
Somebody's working. Plows out in the parking lot.
Well, I'm hoping that you all, what they're doing is actually attaching blades to the front of your cars right now. So when we're done, if you can just do a couple laps around the neighborhoods, that'd be great. But anyway, I will say, if we do close for business, it's just stay tuned. Jay and I have a schedule worked out about how we'll make that decision.
The chief, police chief.
Yeah. February 18th, I believe, is the date. So we already have over 30 applications in, which is, I can't tell you how tickled I am at such a big number so early. So we have changed a few things to try and use more of an initial kind of interview with applications as they come in the door in an effort so that we can work towards interviews, final interviews, much earlier than we had previously laid out for you 2 weeks ago.
But we're anticipating that an interim chief for a while, or is that?
So, yeah, the scheduled celebration of the chief has been pushed back to the March 1st date here at City Council. And so we get to keep her for another couple weeks.
Good. That's great.
And thanks to the chief for that.
That's good news.
A quick question. When's Ralph's last day?
Not until May or June. April 1st.
Ways out.
April 1st.
Oh, so it's not really, it's a joke. It's not really true.
Just kidding.
It's on the schedule before then to come to council. What's
To make sure that we.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that question. Appreciate that. City attorney, any question? City. Without objection, we stand adjourned at 8:05. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.